all about the road to the World Series. Now here we are, and we're watching playoff baseball. And as we watch playoff baseball, you know what I noticed? There is so much emotion. I'm watching these players on the highlights, and I'm seeing a lot of highlights. And whether you go to the MLB Network, ESPN.com, or ESPN.com, it doesn't matter. But I'm just watching a lot of highlights, and I see a lot of emotion. And I see like maybe a pitcher strikes out a guy or gets out a guy in a key situation, and I see this explosion of this emotion, and I understand it. I also see guy maybe hit a big home run, and this all of this emotion that is coming out of these athletes, these million-dollar athletes that are all fighting to become a world champion. And I got to tell you, I love to see it. I love to see because emotion is delivering the passion that they have, and all of the things and how much they care about a team trying to become a world champion. But the road to the World Series starts not today, not in the playoffs. The road to the World Series actually started back on a Little League field. That's where the road to the World Series started. Started on a Little League field. It started in the backyard in a neighborhood game called wiffle ball or stick ball or something, or on a Little League field where someone's, 10, 11, 12 years old, where they began to dream. And the dream was to someday play Major League Baseball. And the road to the World Series started there on that Little League diamond. It started in that backyard. For me, it was not only roaming the grounds of Yankee Stadium, but it was on the streets of New Jersey with the neighborhood kids playing a stickball game with a tennis ball, and our bat was a broken broomstick. That's what it was. But that's where the dream, that's where the time when you were playing those games where you had the visualization, where you started to visualize, where you said it was the 7th game of the World Series, there was a 3-2 count on you, and you were playing maybe Mickey Mantle, or you were playing your favorite player, or maybe they were just playing themselves, being in that situation, the visualization, the roar of the crowd, the stadium, the uniform, the team. And there they are. It's 3-2. It's bases loaded. It's the bottom of the 9th inning. It's the 7th game of the World Series. See, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids go through that scenario thousands and thousands and thousands of times on Little League fields and in backyards and on the street playing neighborhood games. The visualization starts then. That they put themselves in a situation where they're in a World Series. And as they continue the dream and the love for the game, they move on through amateur baseball, through high school baseball, and then some of them go on to play college baseball, and they're dedicated, and they're not only playing for their schools, but then they're playing in summer programs, and people are traveling across countries in summer programs, whether it's American Legion baseball or club baseball in high school to college, where you're going to Alaska or Cape Cod League, and you're giving up your entire summer for a dream. A dream that started maybe in a street, a neighborhood game, a dream that started maybe on a Little League field. See, the road to the World Series doesn't start during the playoffs. It started back when these guys that are in the playoffs, that are now striving to become a world champion, this dream started when they were in Little League baseball, or when they were on the streets, or maybe they were in the fields in the Dominican Republic or Venezuela. I don't know. But maybe it was a chalk, they built a chalk field and chalk bases. The dream and the road to the World Series started long before right now playoff baseball. And then as they work their way through these guys, where I see all of this emotion on TV and all of this stuff coming out for guys that are playing in the playoffs for the first time. See, they went through amateur baseball. They sacrificed time with friends to play baseball on a field with a team called Summer League Baseball. And then as they developed and as they were hopeful They were hopeful that, that maybe someday they could make it and play Major League Baseball. And then eventually they went through a thing called the Major League Draft. And they were amateurs. And then one day they got the call that they were drafted. And they were drafted by a Major League team, and the dream started to open up. It started to peel back. And as they went into the draft, then they were assigned. And they were assigned to a minor league baseball team inside that organization. I call it the bus leagues. It's where you get on a bus and you travel 12, 14, 16, 18 hours on a bus. You get off the bus, you throw on a uniform, and you play a minor league baseball game pursuing the dream of playing Major League Baseball. And then one day, through you, as you work up from A ball to double A to triple A, and maybe for a very few people, maybe you come straight from college to the big leagues or straight from high school to the big leagues, but very, very few, less than 1% that happens. They got to go through what we call the bus leagues. And in the bus leagues, man, it's like everyone in the bus leagues wants to be a major league player, but very few from the bus leagues will ever play on a Major League Baseball field. And the road to the World Series, you see, this is all part of the road. And as they go through the bus league, someday they get the call. They get the call. Coach calls them in. They say, hey, the big club called. And you've been assigned to the major leagues. You're getting called up. They want you today in New York, Detroit, LA. They want you in Minnesota. They want you in Houston, California. They want you to join the major league team. You got the call to the big leagues. A dream that started basically in a neighborhood game where you were thinking it was the World Series and you were hitting and it was the bottom of the ninth, or maybe it was that little league field, and you finally got the call after more than a decade of practicing, pursuing a dream that was developed when you were a young guy. And it took decades, sometimes multiple decades, to fulfill that dream. And you finally got the call. And then you get the call. And when you get the call, you realize the development stage is over. You see, it's not about, just performing well. It's about winning. And it's about getting paid lots and lots of money to win. And at this time, that all of the stress of winning, so from the dream and the excitement and all of the practice to get to a place where they say, if you don't win, we'll find somebody that can win. So you're only there long if you perform. Only if you perform can you stay in the big leagues. So what do you know about major league players in this road to the World Series? They practice daily. Day in and day out. And even though they're one of the rare few, they're the best in the world at what they do, they never stop trying to get better. They never stop trying to find an edge. They never stop thinking about how can I improve my game. They never stop. They're acquiring new coaches, new routines, new behaviors. They're making new commitments. They're disciplined like crazy because they're getting paid to perform. And that the only way that they can stay on the team, and if the team is good enough to where someday they make it to the playoffs, they got to make sure they're on that team. So they got to practice and practice and practice, and they got to strive to get better, and they watch films, and they work on their mindset, they work on their fitness, they work on their craft, they work on their skills, they work on their behaviors, and they're always trying to develop new skills so they can become better and better and better at their craft. So that someday they can hopefully play on a team of like-minded people that come together and someday will make it. And through this grueling schedule of 162 games, with the hope that you'll be playing on a team that makes the playoffs. And that team that started that went through those 162 games. They started in February with something called spring training. And they spend about 30 to 40 days in spring training. And they spend those days in spring training working as a team, being committed to one another, showing up on time 100% of the time, with no excuse of traffic, social media, there was an accident. Every player shows up on time 100% of the time. Not 99% of the time, but all the time, because they're committed. They're committed to each other as teammates. They're committed to their life, to their family, to their profession. They're trying to become best in class. They're trying to become a world champion. And as they go through spring training, they go through the behaviors, the skills, the fundamentals. They practice not one time, not 100 times. They're practicing these things thousands and thousands of times to prepare for a grueling 162 game schedule. And then they go out and they practice. They continue to practice, and there's coaches all over Major League Baseball. There are managers, there's bench coaches, third base coach, first base coach, outfield coach, infield coach, catching coach, bullpen coach, pitching coach, mindset coach, fitness coaches. Coaches are everywhere coaching some of the greatest athletes in the world to try to help them get better so that they can perform at higher levels, more consistently. See, they then become the best in the world and says, I know it all. I'm the man. I don't need any coaching. No, they're striving to get better all the time. They are never comfortable with their performance. They are always uncomfortable with where they're at on this road to the World Series. They are striving day in and day out to get an edge, to get a mindset edge, to get a physical edge. They're developing new skills, new behaviors. They got new coaches. They're doing everything they can in their hearts and their minds, being committed to each person on the team to become the best, to become the best in class, to become the best that they can be. And here's what they know. They know that there's never an end in sight to reaching their human potential as an athlete on that field. So even the greatest player in the world to this day is trying to get better. Just trying to get better. And then they go through a 162 game schedule, and it's grueling. There's travel, there's sacrifice. You're away from family, you're on buses, airplanes, and clubhouses. You go through the day in and day out, the dog. You got to go hunt with and fish and you got to play with the dogs in the dog days of summer and August. And people are tired. And man, you're beat up. You've been going through it. The media is on you. You're not performing to the level that you were being asked to perform. And all of a sudden the media is on you. The fans are booing you. But you got to keep showing up. You got to keep trying to get better. See, because you owe this commitment to the team, the road to the World Series says that we'll lock arms together and we'll laugh together, we'll cry together, we'll sweat together, we'll die together, we'll lose together, we'll win together. We're going to be all in this all the time, always together. In this 162 games, very few days off. Days off are spent traveling. Very little family time. Very little family time. Completely out of balance. Pursuing a dream that started on the streets in the neighborhood. When you were 7, 8, 9 years old, dreaming it was the 7th game of the World Series. You now go through a 162 game grueling schedule, hopeful that your team finally makes the playoffs. And then you do. And you make the playoffs. And as you go through these playoffs and in key moments and key times, key innings, key situations, you perform. And as you perform, it takes me back to what I was talking about earlier, when you see this emotion come out. Because that emotion, it wasn't being prepared an hour earlier. That emotion wasn't being prepared a day earlier. That emotion didn't just start in spring training at 100. That emotion started sometimes multiple decades prior to that moment. And after multiple decades of practice, of visualization, of dreaming, of aspiring to be the best, you're in a moment in the playoffs where the world is tuned in, where MLB.com is watching and all the former players, where ESPN is watching, where Fox News is watching, where the world is watching. And at that moment, that dream that you had as a child, as a kid, it all came together and you excelled. And all this emotion, it comes out and like, yeah! And you're fired up because it was decades to get there. The dream that started on the Little League baseball field, decades later, you seeing yourself in a playoff or in a World Series. It all happens. And then you're in the moment. And then you perform. And the world is watching. And all of this emotion, decades of emotion, comes flying out. And some people, they can't understand where that emotion comes from. It comes from decades of grit. It comes from decades of grinding. It comes from decades of hope. It comes from decades of commitment. It comes from decades of discipline. It comes from decades of sacrifice. It becomes from decades of massive failing miserably to get to that moment, and you have your moment. And it's and what happens on the inside and how you explode on the outside becomes uncontrollable. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, as we're in playoff baseball, the road to the World Series didn't start in 2017. See, it started for a lot of these guys decades ago. And what have they gone through? Let me talk to you for a second, some of the things they've gone through. They've gone through this whole visualization, this whole mindset of seeing themselves and feeling themselves emotionally in a situation. They've gone through years of amateur baseball, summer baseball programs. They developed their craft and skill. It's taken years and years of practice. They've been focused. They had to go through focus. They've had to go through discipline. They've had to go through making a massive commitment. They've made a massive sacrifice to get to this point. They've all had numerous amounts of coaches to help them become the best they could be. They had to create new behaviors. They had to be uncomfortable. They had to go and make tough decisions. Most of all, they have failed miserably. They have failed over and over and over miserably to get to this point in order for them to have that moment to someday become the best. And here's what else they've done. They've taken a sick amount of action towards their goals and dreams. They have taken a sick amount of action. They have practiced for hours, not 10,000 hours, hundreds of thousands of hours, playing a game of baseball on their road someday to the World Series. And guess what else? Quit was never an option. When they were failing miserably, when they were having a tough time, when the coach was giving it to them, when the fans were booing them, when they made headlines, not the kind of headlines you want, they just kept going. They kept moving forward. They kept trying to find a better way. They kept listening to coaches pour into them and pour belief into them when they started to lack belief. You see, but this is their road. This is their life. This is their dream. This is their goal. And playoff baseball, this is their moment. And here's what we know about their moment. There will be only one team crowned a world champion this year. And there will be 29 other teams go home. Hopeful that 2018 will be their year. Here's what they won't do. The 29 teams won't go home and quit. Those 29 teams won't go home and stop trying to get better so that in 2018 they could maybe be crowned the world champion, and they'll go through all of the process and all of the commitment and all of the discipline, and they're going to go through it over and over and over until somebody someday says you're no longer good enough to wear a Major League Baseball uniform. And until that day happens, they'll never, ever, ever, they'll never relent to always striving to get better and be the best that they can be. This is their life. This is their dream. We're all watching. We're cheering for people. We're watching them on TV. We're watching them in the stands. We're talking about them in the neighborhoods. What are we talking about? We're talking about somebody who has given their life to decades of their life and sacrifice and commitment and discipline to a sport, to someday the hope to be hopeful, to be crowned a world champion. Here's what I want you to know. Great for them. What about you? See, what's your road to your World Series? What's it look like? What's it look like seeing yourself crowned as a champion in your sport, in your craft, in your job, in your career, in your family? What's your world champion look like? I got a few questions for you. Are you willing to go through? Are you willing to go through what's necessary for you to become the champion of your life? So you can be called, so you can wear the crown, the championship crown, so you can display the World Series trophy of your life? See, I got a few questions. Are you willing? Are you willing to dare to dream like never before? Are you willing? Do you have the courage to dream like you've never dreamed before? Are you willing to fail miserably? I'm talking miserably in pursuit of this dream. Are you willing to fail miserably? Are you willing to put yourself out there? Are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to commit? Are you willing to practice hours? Are you willing to practice for days? Are you willing to practice for weeks, for months, for years, for decades, so that you can wear the championship crown of your life? Are you willing to make decisions for your dream when the decisions are going to be tough, when you're going to be vulnerable, when the world is telling you it's not possible, when you look across the dinner table and your family is asking you, why are you still pursuing this stupid dream? And you look across that dinner table and you say, I'm going to pursue it until I'm crowned a world champion, or I die trying. Are you willing to make decisions for that dream? Are you willing to create new behaviors or new habits? Are you willing to upset your comfortable little life and get massively uncomfortable? Are you willing to get a coach? Some of you are going to tell me, Todd, I can't afford a coach. I'm telling you, you can't afford not to get a coach. Are you willing to take the quit option off the table? No back door. Listen, don't lock the back door. Wall it up. Wall it up. You were born for massive success. You were born to be the championship, to be the champion of your life. The question is, are you going to go through it? Are you going to go through the pain? Are you going to go through being uncomfortable? Are you going to take the quit option off the table? Are you going to take sick amounts of action? Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. There's one hell of a chance that if you fail miserably today, tomorrow morning you're not going to pick up the newspaper and on the headlines it's not going to say you failed. The guys we're cheering for today in Major League Baseball playoff to their road to the World Series, when they fail, they're going to make headlines tomorrow so the world can read about their failure. Are you willing?